A good Monday to you, Central Georgia, or should I say a good Groundhog Day Monday to you. So obviously the second day of the month of February, all eyes were on our furry friends about what the next 6 weeks of winter are going to look like. But along with that, it was a very eventful weekend forecast. We have a lot of recap to do at the beginning of this extended forecast. Then we'll jump into what's in store for the first full work week of February and getting into the weekend, because obviously probably a good amount of eyes on the weather this weekend, just at the fact that number one, the past 3 weekends have had a chance of winter weather, and number two, it is the Super Bowl on Sunday. So many of you do have lots of festivities planned and want to know if it is going to be a nice forecast to be outdoors and enjoy maybe some outdoor Super Bowl watch parties that we do have for the big game. But first things first, let's get into our furry friends' predictions. 6 more weeks of winter. That's what both Punxsutawney Phil, our nationwide groundhog, did say, and General Beauregard Lee up in Jackson, Georgia. Our Hunter King was live there all morning long, giving us the live prediction of Beauregard Lee, and they both made their predictions roughly around 7:30 this morning. And this is what we were thinking, because we have plenty of sunshine in our forecast. I imagine they did have so up in Pennsylvania as well. But the more sunshine you have, that means you are going to see your shadow more likely than not. That's what both our groundhogs did see. So 6 more weeks of winter is their official prognostication. We'll continue to see if that does come to fruition. I know a lot of you are very tired of the very frigid weather that we've had as of recently. So this doesn't come as the best news to you. Lucky for you, I'm here to break down the forecast with my actual knowledge as a meteorologist, as opposed to our rodent friends that do that. And let's go ahead and go back to last Friday. This is something I always like to do here on an extended forecast during our show. Want to give a shout out to the first graders here at Dames Ferry Elementary School. Went on a school visit as of last Friday morning, one of the few off days I've had as of recently. Spoke with the first graders, a very knowledgeable group of students. In fact, an even bigger group of students than I talked to as of last year. So I wanted to give you guys a shout out. Thanks for having me out to Dames Ferry. I'm happy to come for the second year in a row and speak with all of the wonderful students, just kind of talking about what I do on a daily basis, what my job entails, and how I forecast, and gave them a sneak peek at what was to happen as we got into the weekend. I did promise them some snow, and it did snow up in Jones County, so I'm very happy to report that I did not tell a fib, at least on my school visit right there. But your reports from the field, we were kind of lacking on these. I'm going to need you guys to do a little bit better next time, but we did get plenty of reports and some measurements from many of our easternmost counties here in central Georgia. So where you do see the letter T, that is going to mark a trace. So that means that, yes, we did see some flurries, but it likely didn't amount to anything that accumulated down on the surface, or you might have seen a little bit of that white snow that was kind of clustered on the ground, trying to accumulate just a little bit. But all in all, there was one area that kind of stood alone in its totals, and that was Putnam County. 4 inches of snow that was reported in the Rock Eagle 4-H Center, and 2.3 inches of snow up in Jasper County. That was up in the Shadydale area in the northern end of the county. For the most part, most areas of central Georgia, and as far as our reports go, only got maybe about a quarter to a half of an inch of snow accumulation. We had plenty of areas as far down south as Dodge County, down in Telfair County, that did report at least seeing some snow. However, not leading to much accumulation whatsoever. But it is worth noting those were just the reports that we did get from the field. Here's what the National Weather Service has gotten from EMA directors and actual measurements that it's seen. Number one, what you're going to notice is the snow is very widespread. It wasn't just limited to east central Georgia. We actually did see our fair share of some flurries over to the west of Atlanta, across the metro area, even up in the northwestern portion of the state, but it didn't amount to much. And we're not seeing those dark shades of the blue, maybe even getting into some yellow colors like we do see mainly to the east and the north of us. So there was a band of heavy snow that went over the Lake Lanier area. That was one we were monitoring as it crept closer and closer into central Georgia, and you can see that the blue colors start to get a little bit lighter in nature as you creep down into Jasper and into Putnam counties. But up to the northeast of us, Athens and northeast of Athens, east of Commerce as you go farther up I-70 or I-85, 3.5, 6.5, 7.5 inches of snow across some areas just to the northeast of Athens. I believe this was in Colbert, Georgia right there. And as you go across the I-20 corridor, we saw our fair share of some snowfall as well. Washington, we actually did have former 13 WMAZ weather intern Malik Bryant. He works in Augusta now, and he was stationed over in Washington. We were getting some incredible videos from him amongst our college friend group. And then we go into I-20 where we see some totals up to 5, maybe 5.5 inches as you get closer and closer to Augusta. But really the most measurable amounts that we did see here were found up in Jasper County and up in Putnam County. So you see that 2.3 reading right there. That was just to the east of Shadydale, getting pretty close to the Putnam and the Jasper County line. Then you get into this isolated pocket of 4 right here to the north of Eatonton. And then most areas of northeast central Georgia, not even reaching an inch amount. So we did have the highlighted potential of about 1 inch to 3 inches. This goes to show that these are just some rough estimates according to the National Weather Service, and that's where our guidance did come from. And very thankfully, we didn't have that much snow accumulate because that would have resulted in plenty of hazardous road conditions, which we did not have in light of the small accumulation of snow in areas like Sparta, areas down into Sandersville, even up in the Milledgeville area around Lake Sinclair. And we did see the snow stretch as far as the Macon area, North Macon, getting into downtown Macon. We saw a couple of flurries. We saw a very light amount of accumulation, maybe even up to around 1/10 of an inch. Almost all of Jones County saw something in the way of at least some light and some steady flurry showers. And we did see this stretch as far down south as areas like Eastman, and we did get some reports of at least a couple flurries down in McRae. So maybe I'll have to send in some of that data. The National Weather Service will do a little bit of tweaking to this graphic. But once again, I think it was pretty spot on in terms of what we were forecasting, which was northeast central Georgia. You guys are looking like you're going to see the main impacts, this northeastern quadrant of our area. We did see a couple of snowfall totals get a little bit south of I-16, but overall not necessarily accumulating too much. And then we went into Sunday morning, and here's a look at your satellite imagery from Sunday morning because I thought this was a really cool image. All of this white that you see right here across South Carolina, up into the northeastern half of Georgia. This is all snow that is sticking on the ground as of the early morning hours. You can start to see a little bit of yellow back into Alabama, and that's going to indicate still some of those lights that are shining because obviously this was when we started to get a first image of light in the sky. So we can see the snow that is continuing to stick to the ground into Sunday morning, but not near as dense in color as what you see in upstate South Carolina, actually getting more so into kind of the lower country of South Carolina and all the way up into North Carolina. In fact, we saw some areas of Charlotte that got about 11 inches, nearly a foot of snow up there in the metro Charlotte area. But you can see this really fine cutoff line of some of that snow that's continuing to stick on the ground. And once again, you go to the east, closer to the South Carolina state line, go up to I-20, go up to I-85. That's where the bulk of the snow did fall here in the state of Georgia. So as far as rain goes, it's obviously February 2nd now. We have to go ahead and recap all of our numbers as of January. Well, I guess we don't have to, but I like to do it just to give us a reference of what we do need in the rainfall department and maybe how we rounded out the month as far as your temperatures go. So it was kind of a staggering decline that we did see throughout the month of January as far as rain goes. We actually did receive a good amount, almost 1 inch of rainfall back on the 25th, and that put us from down in the bottom of the very dry category back up into the dry category. But then we saw a lack of rain whatsoever. We did have those wintry precipitation chances and that wintry weather, but it didn't result in anything in the way of allowing for some rainfall totals, basically. So in total for the month of January, pretty dry. 2.34 inches of rain that we did receive. 4.02 inches of rain on average is what we typically see for the month of January, and we ended January in the very dry category. 2026 off to a pretty dry start like how we did in 2025, and this is also reciprocated on your drought monitor where most of central Georgia finds themselves in a severe drought. Northernmost counties do find themselves in a moderate drought, but we also see that severe drought stretching into north and northeastern Hancock County, and we see some patches of that dark red color, so the extreme drought closer to the Columbus area right on the Georgia-Alabama state line. and down to the southeast of us as you get into areas like Baxley, Georgia. I imagine getting down into areas pretty close to the Savannah area. So really anywhere in between southeast central Georgia and Savannah and down immediately to the southeast of us. They need the rain even more desperately than we do. Hopefully we can continue to have some of this precipitation, whether it was the wintry weather form or not. Maybe that can be taken into account with the next couple of updates with the drought monitor, but it does look like we are going to continue to see the expansion of maybe some of these drought conditions into the beginning of 2026. And January completely flipped the script, exactly like the month of January. At the end of it all, believe it or not, we actually had more below average days than we did above average days by just one tally after this stretch of 8 consecutive days in a row from the 24th all the way through the 31st to round out a good stretch of some 40s and some 50s for high temperatures. We had a very similar stretch at the beginning of January with above average numbers. Then we started to see the two mixing together, and then the last week of January was a very, very frigid note. So obviously we started out December on a very frigid note, flipped the script. It was a very warm Christmas. Cooled down for New Year's for just a brief period, but then we went into the first real week of January with above average numbers, and then we ended the month of January the opposite of how we ended December, on a below average note. So that'll do it for all the recap. I know that was a good portion of this extended forecast, but the main headline that you need to know and that you can go ahead and take a look at and maybe just tune out for the rest of this forecast, that could just be some white noise. No winter weather chances as we go into the first full week of February. So we're very, very thankful for that. Rain is going to be back in the picture as soon as tomorrow night. So we'll break down what we're expecting in the way of rain, and then some warmer numbers will be present for the majority of this week. We had highs in the 40s and the 50s last week. We're going to be more so a story of the 50s and the 60s throughout the remainder of this week. Walk around the quad shows nothing but blue sky. Still a tad bit breezy. We are holding on to some winds out of the northwest, maybe out of the west right now that you can see at the Georgia National Fairgrounds. It's cold across most of the country, but not near as cold as it was, say, about 2 days ago time. 41 here in the Macon area, 41 over in Montgomery, even some 40s all the way down in Florida. It is not often, and as of recently, we have not seen temperatures like 43, 45 in Orlando, when you're popping up some near 60-degree temperatures in Laredo and over in Houston. In fact, I did see one of our old meteorologists, Courtney Jacobazzi. She posted this morning that some areas down in Florida and in Tampa, they were colder than Montana as of this morning. So it is just quite an interesting stretch of weather that we are having here across the eastern United States and continuing to be crowded by blue. There is plenty of blue in this forecast right now over in the eastern seaboard. As you go back over to the west, Texas, maybe some areas just east of the Rocky Mountains, it is looking like you're starting to get some slightly above average numbers, maybe even getting some green filtering in, indicating some temperatures that could be in the 50s and eventually into the 60s. So current temperatures across the state and the southeast, upper half of the 30s, low 40s. You can see a 47 at the warmest over there in Pensacola. And we get up into South Carolina where they're still holding on to some temperatures scattered about the 30s, 35 in Columbia, 34 in Greenville, and a 38 all the way down in Charleston. Here in central Georgia, we also have our fair share of areas that are holding on to those upper 30s up to the north, the northeast, maybe a few down here to the southeast in Eatonton and in McRae. Elsewise, we do see some low 40s, just right there around the 40-degree mark. And your winds and your wind gusts, a steady breeze, maybe up to 7, 8, 9 miles per hour. Occasional gusts up to 16 miles per hour down in Eastman. Overall, not too much change from your forecast from the last couple of days. So you know that your feels like temperature is still going to be a little bit below what the actual numbers do say. Feels like numbers and those wind chill values scattered about the 30s and maybe even 1 or 2 upper 20s that are still sticking around. Satellite and radar shows a few clouds around the metro Atlanta area, but overall our forecast is looking pretty crystal clear. The cloud cover is in the northern half of the state. Doesn't look like we're going to have anything in the way of cloud cover throughout your forecast this Monday afternoon. Good bit of a tease as we get into Futureview here very shortly. So 41 degrees. That was 20 degrees below average yesterday, and 41 did not feel like 41. 41 degrees felt more like the upper 20s and the low 30s throughout yesterday afternoon. It was blistering and just a downright very, very cold forecast that you really did not want to be outside for. I can attest to it. I had to wear some gloves and about 3 or 4 layers when walking Aspen around the neighborhood. 18 degrees for a morning low, and that number felt more like the single digits. But talking about your numbers for the month of February, we're heading into a new month, so obviously we have a lot to break down. And one of these years for the records is going to stand out to you. Not going to be 2023, 85 degrees. That's the warmest day that we've had in February all time. The coldest goes to 8 degrees back in 1917. The wettest month of February, actually just over 10 years ago, 2013, we had nearly 13 inches of rain. But if you want to talk about the snowiest February you will have, this is the year that's going to ring a bell. Anyone remember the blizzard of 73? 16.5 inches of snow dumped in the Macon area. So obviously that's good enough to take the cake for the record. That's going to be the snowiest day that we did have throughout history here in Central Georgia. As far as your averages go, we're starting out the beginning of the month. Average high temperature 61 degrees and your average low at 37 degrees. They go up, but they don't go up too much. I would say your high temperature goes up a little bit more than say your average low temperature. 42 is going to be your average low by the time we round out the month of February, and 67 degrees for an average high temperature. We're starting to flirt with the 70-degree mark once again as we transition to the end of February, getting into March, which does feel pretty appropriate that our average high temperature getting really close to 70 degrees as we're heading into March when we start to welcome in spring. So on average, we also see just around 4.5 inches of rain. February is a bit of a wetter month on the calendar year as opposed to January and as opposed to December. On average, we typically get around 3/10 of an inch of snow. I don't see any signs of that as of right now, but over the last month that we have had, at least the Macon area is probably seeing at least 1 or 2 inches of snow. That might be our quota so far for the winter season, but we'll continue to keep you updated if we do see any signs of a winter system that could be approaching in the future. We don't see any signs of that whatsoever. So sunrise and sunset time here at the beginning of the month, just around 7:30 as of yesterday morning. 6:07 p.m. is going to be the sunset time. Well, as we go into the end of the month, we are gaining 50 minutes of daylight. Sunrise is going to be close to the 7 a.m. hour again, and your sunrise or sunset is going to be 6:30 p.m. on the 28th of February, and then we'll get into the first week of March. These numbers are going to change very drastically because the first weekend of March is looking to be when we do set the clocks forward and we spring forward for daylight saving time kicking off. So now talking about really what's ahead for the rest of today and as we go throughout the rest of the work week. There's not too many talking points, but we'll break down what you do need to know. A clear and cool day for your Groundhog Day afternoon. Going to feel a lot better than yesterday afternoon, that is for certain. 51 degrees, even paired up with an occasional breeze. That number is going to feel a lot closer to what the actual temperature reads. So that's where this graphic tops out, and typically this graphic has been known to undershoot our high temperature as of recently, really the last month or two that we've had in the winter season. This graphic has kind of struggled with that high temperature, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a 52 or a 53, but I'm still going to stand my ground with 51 degrees for a high temperature. Your wind chills are looking like they'll feel a little bit cooler, but topping out in the upper 40s and then making the decline back down closer to the upper 30s as we go into the evening and the nighttime hours a little bit later on today. Here's a look at the numbers as we go into midnight, around 34 degrees. So pretty similar cool down to what we've seen as of recently. And Futureview will show that there's not much in the way of cloud cover that could be arriving until we really get into tomorrow morning. And even at that, it's just some higher level clouds. So I don't think it's really going to block your sunshine whatsoever as you are walking out the door tomorrow morning. Now we go into tomorrow afternoon, still on and off cloud cover, plenty of peaks of sunshine. So I do anticipate our temperatures to warm up even warmer than what we will see throughout today and this afternoon as we go into tomorrow afternoon. But you can start to see some signs of some change in the top left of your screen. This cluster of some rain showers does creep closer and closer, starting around 8 to 9 p.m. as we go into Tuesday night. So this is going to be likely after dinner time. This cluster of some widespread light, steady, maybe even some occasional pockets of some heavier rain will creep in from northwest down to the southeast. But it isn't going to have a clean sweeping motion through central Georgia. What it's going to do is have a very slow progress. So you are going to see, especially farther down to the south, areas farther to the south are going to hold on to these rain chances a little bit longer than areas up to the north. But you should plan on a very messy morning commute on Wednesday morning. This is around 5 a.m. If we continue into 8 a.m., which once again, the rain chances aren't as widespread. But if you're heading to the east, you're heading down to the south, you very well could run into some of these showers a little bit farther along the road. Plenty of green and plenty of gloomy skies that are in the forecast. Just make sure that you grab the rain jacket, before heading out the door on Wednesday. It does look like most of the afternoon we will see a lot of these rain chances beginning to taper off, but there are still our fair share of some scattered and maybe even a couple of more widespread pockets relatively of some lighter to maybe even possibly some steady showers down to the south and the southeast. Actually, some peaks of sunshine as we go into Wednesday afternoon around 4 o'clock. But overall, it's just going to be a downright messy day until maybe we get a peak of sunshine farther up to the north that you do live. 10 p.m. Showers are still very reluctant to get out of the picture. We might see 1 or 2 sprinkles that want to hang around for the morning hours on Thursday, but it does look like we keep the cloud cover around as we do go into Thursday, which is going to probably have an influence maybe on what your morning low temperature value is as you walk out the door on Thursday morning. So 51 for a high for the rest of your Groundhog Day, nothing but sunshine in the forecast. Then we welcome in those rain chances as soon as the nighttime hours tomorrow. So that's why I have that 20% on there, but that is once again going to mainly be for northwest central Georgia, and that is also going to be for just the nighttime hours, past dinner time, starting as early as around 8 or 9 p.m., going all the way until the midnight hour. And then once we transition into the midnight hour, I kind of classify it as the overnight hours, 1, 2, maybe getting into 3 and 4 in the morning, because that's going to be the time that many of you are already fast asleep. 61 degrees for a high temperature tomorrow after our morning low temperature starts out a bit more pleasant than this morning, but it is still going to be below freezing. 61 for an afternoon high. That would be right on par with average for this time of year. The first time we look to do that since maybe about 2 weeks' time. It's been a very consistent stretch of below average days like we were talking about. And then as we go Tuesday night into early Wednesday morning, all that cloud cover, all of that rain in the forecast, more moisture in the forecast, there's an increase of your morning low temperature between Tuesday and Wednesday of 21 degrees. We are starting out in the upper 40s, maybe even in the low 50s across most areas in central Georgia as you walk out the door on Wednesday. However, it is coming at the cost of a very gloomy and dreary atmosphere. So you'll definitely need the rain jacket, the umbrella, the rain boots, whatever you need rain gear wise. However, it is going to feel a lot more pleasant. You are not going to have that bitter chill in the air and that brisk feeling to walk outside to, kind of Mother Nature's natural way of waking you up. That's what we've had the last couple of days. And then 59 for a high temperature. So not as much of a temperature spread between your morning low and your afternoon high, but that does make a lot of sense because that's what we typically see on predominantly cloudy days. Then 70% chance of seeing a shower. Once again, you could have some pockets that are going to be maybe some more substantial rain, but overall, whatever does fall in the way of rain is not really looking too substantial whatsoever. You'll see most of our values here in central Georgia are actually going to be pretty much around the 1/4 of an inch mark. I would set the range at about 1/4 of an inch, maybe even going into about a 1/2 inch of rainfall. That's not going to be anything significant. We would need maybe about an inch, 2 or 3 in terms of how much weather or how much rain that we do need in order to alleviate some of those drought conditions that have settled in. But hey, we'll take any little bit of rain that we can get, and it does look like almost everyone here in central Georgia is looking to receive something in the way of rainfall. So as far as your afternoon high temperatures go, I was talking about a frontal boundary being the driving force associated with those rain chances. Well, after it passes through, which looks like it's going to be sometime maybe around mid to late morning on Thursday, it is going to begin to usher in some slightly cooler air. And it is not going to be as significant of a cool down that we've had as of recently, where we've seen these big Arctic fronts move through that are ushering in some very, very frigid air from well up to the north back up into southern Canada. We just have some slightly cooler numbers that are going to be down into the low 50s for highs on Thursday. And just as quick as we cool down briefly, we warm back up into a high temperature of 60 degrees, pretty close to average as we roll into your Friday afternoon. For your morning low values, good news if you hate this bitter cold start. Today is going to be the lowest that our numbers will go for the rest of the work week and going into your weekend. 27, yes, we still have the potential to see these numbers drop down below average and below freezing temperature, which we do see on Tuesday, maybe getting into Thursday morning, Friday morning, but 48 degrees. There's obviously one of these numbers that is not like the others, and that is going to be Wednesday morning. That is around 11 degrees above average, as opposed to each and every other day that is somewhere in the neighborhood of around 10 degrees below average for your morning lows. So as we go into your extended forecast, your long-range models are hinting that once again, some cloud cover, maybe even a couple of spotty sprinkles and drizzles are going to hang around in the picture sometime around lunchtime, and then I do believe we'll clear out as we go throughout the day on Thursday. Friday morning going to be a nice and brisk start to the day, but I anticipate Friday afternoon to be full of some near average high temperatures and nothing but sunshine. It should be an amazing feeling afternoon and a great start to any weekend plans that you do have for, like I mentioned, Super Bowl weekend or just general plans throughout your first weekend that you haven't had the chance of winter weather to combat with some outdoor plans. Saturday afternoon looks splendid as well. A few more clouds in the picture on Sunday, but nothing that results in anything in the way of rain. So your streak of 3 consecutive weekends with the winter weather chance in central Georgia officially comes to an end at 3. We are not going to extend it for the 4th weekend in a row, and it looks like we're really leaving those winter weather chances in the month of January as of right now. We'll talk about what we see in your extended forecast, but there's no signs of anything in the way of another winter storm. I've received some messages about looking ahead already to Valentine's Day weekend and stuff. Don't go buying stock into anything past the next 7 days. We don't do it. We, of course, keep an eye on it, but one model run may say we're getting 20 inches of snow, and the very next model run might hint that, oh, you're not going to get anything. So the fluctuation and the volatility that we see with all these extended models about 14 days out is very, very, well, I guess very volatile is what I was going to say as far as that. But they change a lot is what I'm trying to get across. So obviously you can't go trusting what one individual model run says 2 weeks out in time. My motto is always, you don't know what you're going to have for your dinner maybe as you get into 2 weeks in the future. Maybe a bit of an exception with this rule since next weekend is Valentine's Day. You might be making some reservations, but typically you don't plan your meals out ahead of time about a week or two. So obviously don't go believing what the weather models are saying about a week or two in advance. So here's a look at the 7-day forecast, 51 to 61 in between today and tomorrow. Those rain chances begin to creep in as of tomorrow night, starting around 8 to 9 p.m. at the very earliest, and that's really for northwestern central Georgia. If you live in areas farther down to the south and the southeast, it's more so going to be a Wednesday morning rainmaker. However, I didn't highlight the morning time frame on here because we will continue to see rain chances into the afternoon and maybe even into the evening. So that's why Wednesday is kind of looking like an all-day rain event, especially for areas farther down to the south that could continue to see round after round of these light and maybe even some steady showers. Brief cool down into Thursday after the passage of this frontal boundary. Then we see the numbers pop back up to near average as we go into the weekend ahead. I think we'll see some fluctuation with your highs and your lows as we go into Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. However, I am anticipating nothing but sunshine really in our forecast. At the most, maybe a partly cloudy afternoon, but we're not looking at any rain chances. And most importantly, not looking at anything in the way of winter weather chances. But it is Groundhog Day, and the Groundhogs give us a look ahead about what's ahead for 6 weeks into the future. It is looking like we are going to make the return to more seasonable numbers on your 7-day forecast for the first week of this prediction. But then going into next week, looks like we might even have a slight probability of seeing some above normal temperatures as we roll into February 9th all the way through the 15th, which will be next Sunday. That's going to be the day after Valentine's Day. So it does look like we have a slight chance of maybe seeing some 60s, maybe even some mid-60s. In fact, a lot of the models that I've looked at as of this morning are hinting at the 70s could return as we go into the midway to kind of the late portion of the midweek or the work week next week. And we are very likely looking at these shades of some orange and some red to shift over to the east as we go a couple days into the future. So right now that is a very promising sign. If you are very reluctant and kind of in denial about the Groundhog's prediction, it does look like we're going to have a stretch of at least some more seasonable weather, high temperatures where they should be, morning low temperatures hopefully around where they should be, which is going to be in the upper 30s to start out each and every day, and going to be somewhere in the lower 60s as we get into each and every afternoon. But we could even see some 70s as we go into this portion of next week, the 9th through the 15th. Wouldn't doubt it as of right now, but it doesn't look like there are signs of anything that will be below average that would correlate to, say, maybe another winter weather chance. Not seeing any of that on the radar as of right now. So we kind of went really in depth with the extended forecast. We recapped a lot, talked about this past weekend, talked about the groundhog, and really went well into the future. I normally end it on the 7-day forecast, but I wanted to give you a glimpse at what's ahead as of right now to hopefully at least kind of ease the worries, because that is going to be the topic as of recently, with many folks that are anticipating the next winter weather chance after we've had it each and every weekend for the past 3 weekends. Nothing to worry about right now. This weekend looking like an amazing forecast. Make sure that you soak it up while it does last, because we are going to get into the end of February, March, April, again, then eventually into May. Once we get into that spring season, that will be our severe weather season, and there's very likely going to have your fair share of weekends that'll have some thunderstorms in the forecast, so you got to soak up the nice ones while they do last right now. That's going to do it for your extended forecast. We'll be back once again at 11 a.m. tomorrow to preview what's ahead for the rest of the week.